All right, so this problem really is following very directly on what we did yesterday. It's the same kind of problem. And in order to figure out what that number is that goes in the blank, we start by taking our middle number, which in this case is going to be the 20, positive 20, and we divide it by 2. And that gives us 10. What is 10 squared? 100. So that's what we put in the blank. Divide that middle number by 2 and square it, and that's what that last number has to be. Now, then the second part here is then go ahead and factor it. So if I now write this in factored form, the x squared plus 20x plus 100, then that is going to become x plus 10 squared. You notice when we did 20 divided by 2, it gave us 10. That's always the same number that ends up inside the parentheses, of course. Now this was yesterday's work, and we did yesterday's work because we're really building some skills that you're going to need in order to be able to do today's work. Today we're going to be seeing how we can use that skill to solve something that looks like this. So go ahead and write down this equation, and then we're going to go through step by step seeing what this process really looks like. So to start with, let's identify the problem that we have to overcome here. And that is that this equation includes x squared and x in it. Because it has both the x squared and the x, we can't just take the square root of both sides, because we'd actually be taking the square root of this whole thing with the x in there, and it wouldn't just be x plus 20 or something. And we can't really divide both sides by x. Some people are tempted to do that, because if we did that, we'd have 21 over x, and we'd still have an x plus 20 over here. That just looks really messy. In fact, it's not very nice to solve. And actually, when you start solving it, you'll get right back to where we started. And so instead, what we can do is we can actually find a technique for solving this using the stuff that we were just doing, which is called completing the square. What I want to do is I want to be able to make this left side of our equation into this. I want there to be this plus 100 hanging on the end. Because if I can do that, then I'm then going to be able to turn this into x plus 10 squared. And if I can turn it into x plus 10 squared, then I can take just the square root of both sides. So, if I'm going to put that 100 into the equation like that, that means I got to add something to both sides. In this case, because there's nothing currently here as a number, in this case it's fairly straightforward. If I want there to be a 100 there, I have to add 100 to both sides. And so have this work written down in your notes, and we're going to continue going through it from here. All right, and so you'll notice here what we did is we just tried to figure out what can I add or subtract to both sides in order for there to be this plus 100, making it factorable. All right, now again, the reason why we wanted it to be 100 in particular is because I can now factor. So we factor the left-hand side now, and it becomes x plus 10 squared. Notice what we did there. We went from an equation that had x squared and x in it to now an equation that just has x in it. The x now appears just once, which means it's now solvable. And we know what to do from here. That's how we actually practiced our work on Wednesday, was we started by just doing the solving part. So, to get rid of the squared, we square root. So square root both sides. When you do so, of course, the thing to remember is the plus or minus. And because we're going to have to operate on that 11 and the negative 11, we are going to go ahead and write that as two separate equations at that point, and then solve each of those. Of course, that means just subtracting 10 from both sides on each, and so we can get our solutions. Make sure you have all this work written down for this first introductory problem and shown in detail, because it's going to be a good reference for you. All right, so for this problem now, we're going to use the same method to solve it. But it's a little bit trickier. There's a little bit more going on. And in this case, I didn't start by saying, hey, what will make this number into what we want it to be? And so we really have to go through the full process of thinking it through here. So step one is we need to figure out what would we want this number to be if I'm going to make this a factorable perfect square. In other words, I want to be able to turn it into x plus or minus something squared. What should the number inside the parentheses be here that I'm going to target? Well, what's negative 14 divided by 2? Negative 7. And so I'm going to end up going to a negative 7 inside there. And oftentimes, you might get in the habit where you actually write that down ahead of time, but most of the time you'll probably end up just doing that in your head. Oops. All right. Now, if that's going to be a negative 7 in there, what do I want this number to be instead?
49.
Yes, exactly. We want it to be a 49. So basically I said, okay, negative 14 divided by 2 is negative 7. Negative 7 squared is 49. And so this is actually the order that I would write this out in. I would start by writing out that I want to make it into x squared minus 14x plus 49. And I'm kind of leaving this as a blank here about what I'm adding. Because in this case, I'm basically deciding what's my target ahead of time. It's a little bit different from a normal process that you would use, which is why we've taken so much prep time, because that's this one little tweak. It's a little bit tricky to get our head around at first. All right, so I know I want it to become a 49. What would I have to do to 20 to turn it into 49? Yep, we'd have to add 29 to 20 to turn it into 49. So I can go ahead and now write that in, that I'm adding 29. And of course, if I add 29 over here, I have to add it to both sides. And that's why the other side changes, because I'm having to add 29 to both. All right, now that we've done that, this problem now looks like one that I've had you solve a few times before. Because I've given you problems that look just like this. It's just we had to do one step in order to get here. So, in order to solve it from here, go ahead and factor the left-hand side. And then once you've factored it, then you'll be able to take the square root of both sides. And then once you've taken the square root, you'll be able to then finish solving it. So when we go to factor it, we turn it into x minus 7 squared. Remember, the beauty of this method is that we turned our two x's into just one x. That's why I want it to be something squared. Now I can get rid of the squared. So we square root both sides. Again, make sure that you include the plus or minus at this point. Every now and then, some people try to save the plus or minus like till the end or something. Causes problems, gives them headaches, doesn't work. So put it in as soon as you write the square root symbol. Now notice the stuff inside the parentheses, the part that was squared, it stays the same when we split it into the two equations. The plus or minus is attached to the number. So it becomes 5 and negative 5. The number is the part where we flip the sign. And then, easy to solve from that point at least. Go ahead and add the 7 to both sides on each, and we get our two solutions.